a sicha on Parshas Shelach. It's from Chelek Chav Gimel. It's sicha Aleph and Chelek Chav Gimel. We're learning, as we have been doing, in the schos of our four shlema for Rav Yosef Yitzchak ben Sima Chasya. And we're also approaching the Yom Hagadol B'Hanoyer Gimel Tammuz. So the sicha very much speaks to our bond with the Rebbe, and we're going to begin. It's a very short sicha relative to the sichas we usually learn together, and very yisaidistic. Seif Aleph, ala pasuk shlach lecha anashim. The opening words of this week's parsha, Amru Chazal, and Rashi cites this in both in the Gemara Seita and here in our parsha. Shlach lecha l'daitcha. That Hashem says to Moshe, send for you, send in accordance with your opinion, send in accordance with your judgment. Hainu, meaning, sheshiluach hameraglim hayatalui b'daita shel Moshe, ve'ilu ani eini mitzava eischa. And like Rashi says, I am not commanding you. The sending of the meraglim, of the spies, of the scouts, of the reconnaissance team is based on your judgment. It depends on your opinion. V'tzarach lahavin, we have to understand. Moshe Rabbeinu haya eved neman shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe is described as being a loyal servant of Hashem. Umizem muvan. And so from this description, it's understood Shedaita shel Moshe sheyesh l'shloichas meraglim nava mikach sheken ha'isadaita shel Adonai HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That surely, based on the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is described to us as being a loyal servant, it must be that his opinion or his judgment call to send meraglim, to send scouts, to send spies, flowed from the fact that this was the opinion or the judgment of his master, the Eibishter, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Ukafisha kasub atzmei meid, and like the next psukim themselves, the actual pasuk testifies, because it says, by Yishlach Eisam Moshe al pi Hashem, b'shusa shel Kadosh Baruch Hu, with the permission of Hashem. So it comes out that the sending of spies in and of itself was a positive thing. It was something that was good. It was something that was accepted by Hashem. So why the stress on shlach lecha l'datcha? If we understand that Moshe Rabbeinu is an Eved Neman, then obviously there's not going to be any difference between his judgment or his opinion and what the Eibishter wants. And the pasuk actually corroborates that. In the brackets, Ukabir HaRamban, and like the Ramban explains, Shahderech Haragila Lichbaish Aretz, Hi Al Yidei Shiluach Meraglim Tchila. It's a logical thing. The Ramban explains that the normal way to conquer a land, to take over a new territory, is by sending a reconnaissance team to scope out what's happening there. In order to test what is the easiest way, what is the best way to conquer the given territory. And because Chazal taught us that we're not supposed to rely on nisim, on miracles. We're supposed to do everything that we can in the natural way. V'yesh chayva, Rabbi underscores this word, and there is a responsibility liskoinin l'milchama b'derech hateva, to prepare for war in a conventional manner. Hiskim Moshe Rabbeinu l'shleichas meraglim. So therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu agreed when the Yidden came. He agreed that they should send meraglim. And so if this is so, how the Ramban explains it, that this is just the normal way. Ain't a move on, it's not understood. Lama tala zayis HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'daita shel Moshe v'lo tziva al kach milechatchila ba'atzmai. So why did Hashem leave this open and specifically dependent on Moshe's opinion? Why didn't Hashem milechatchila command that they should send meraglim? We have to understand something else. Rashi explains that the meraglim, when they left on their mission, were ksherim. They were good, they were wonderful, they were whole, they were viable. And you don't need Rashi to tell you this. Logically, these were people that were handpicked by Moshe. These weren't just people that it fell out a goyrel, or they were the ones that said, fine, we'll do it. Moshe Rabbeinu handpicked them. So once we understand that they were chosen for this mission, then surely the Rebbe says they were not just ksherim, they were not just okay, they were not just viable, but rather they were the most worthy and the most matim. They were the most, they were the people who are most fit for this particular shlichus. It's not like, okay, memela, or, after the fact, okay, I'll concede that they're ksherim. No, they were the best for this, vimkein. And if so, how is it possible? How did such a change overcome them? From one end to the other, from one extreme to another. So here you have people that were handpicked, that were cherry-picked by Moshe. They are understood to be the most fit people for this shlichus. And at the end, not only did they not fulfill the shlichus properly, but they brought upon Bnei Yisrael a travesty for all time, for all generations. Base. So why did Hashem not l'chatchila command Bnei Yisrael, command Moshe, that this was the way that they should go about the war, the kibush haaretz? And the other thing is, it's very hard to understand what happened here with the meraglim. Here, they're the creme de la creme, and on the other hand, they brought such a big problem, such a big tragedy. Base. V'yuban bahaktim habir b'mashematinu shematara shlichazu ha'isabichlalos shnei inyanim. The Rebbe said we'll understand this by prefacing first with an explanation on what exactly was their shlichus. And the Rebbe says that we find that their shlichus was comprised of two aspects, two facets. Aleph, levarer es hapratim hanoigim lekibush haaretz. First of all, they had to clarify, they had to glean the necessary information for conquering the land. Like it says, if you have handy a chumash near you, so the pasuk says Yudches in Perek Yud Gimel, or Isem es haaretz mahi ves ha'ama yeshiv aleh hazaku harafa hamaat hu imrav. You shall see what the land is like, and the people who live there. Are they strong or weak, few or many? Umaha haaretz asher hu yeshiv ba. And in what kind of land are they living? Hatoiva hi imra. Is it good or bad? And in what types of cities are they living? Are they living in open cities or fortified cities? So that's first of all, to gather intelligence about the land that they are about to take over. And Beis, levar es hapratim odes haaretz gufa. And secondly, to gather information about the land itself. And I'm going to read the whole pasuk. It's pasuk chaf. It's the last pasuk in yesterday's chitas. Umaha eretz hashmenahi imraza. And what is the soil like? Is it fertile or is it depleted? Is it poor? Hayesh ba'etz. Is there a tree of protection? Im ayin or not? Ves chazaktem, the pasuk continues to say, and you shall be courageous, ulekachtem mipri haaretz, and you shall take some of the fruits of the land. The Chelek zeh hasheni, and this second aspect of their shlichus, shebishlichusam haya negea ad kedei kach, was so important to their overall mission. Shemoshe hayra lahem v'hischazaktem v'lakachtem mipri haaretz. Moshe had to instruct them to be strong, strengthen themselves, and take some of the fruit. What does this mean? Because although it meant that by taking fruit, they will draw attention to themselves and therefore endanger themselves, because those that are observing them will recognize that they are not just casual tourists, that they have come to gather information, that they are intelligence seekers. Mikol Makoim, the Rebbe says, still in all, Aleim lischazek ulisametz lahavi mipriya aretz. But still, it was so important for them to bring fruit back that even though it entailed a danger, it would blow their cover. Moshe Rabbeinu said, be strong and do this. The Rebbe says it's not so simple to understand this. It's not so, it doesn't compute so smoothly. It's true. We have a axiom that hearing doesn't compare to seeing. So they could have come back and talked about how huge and luscious and succulent the fruits were and how impressive and so on and so forth. But nothing compares to seeing it with your own eyes. So despite the fact that Hashem had already told Bnei Yisrael that they're going into a land that is good and is expansive, and it's a land that flows with milk and honey. In other words, the Eibishter had already described to them what a wonderful land this was. Bnei Yisrael he ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. And Bnei Yisrael are, generally speaking, believers. Ubefrad shebinyanenu loy niskaku le'emuna shari bevadai hadorim b'mitzrayim yadu me'na'aseh be'eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe says, and in this case, they didn't even need to suspend their logic and just trust. They didn't even have to believe. It wasn't about emunah, because they had lived in Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim abuts Eretz Canaan, Eretz Yisrael, and so surely they had heard the truth about this land. Still, adayin ein lahashva izois l're'iyas peres haaretz. Still in all, the fact that the Eibishter told them how wonderful this land is, and the fact that they had lived geographically so close to this land and surely had heard about it, all of this doesn't compare to seeing it with your own eyes. Shehaya b'koicha ligrem livnei Yisrael simcha yesera. Rebbe says, because what's the mile of seeing it with your own eyes? Because then it becomes concretized, because then it becomes real. And then this can cause you extra joy, extra happiness, extra buoyancy, and it bolsters you la alois sham besimcha, to go up to Eretz Yisrael, then Eretz Canaan, that would become Eretz Yisrael besimcha. So this is such a profound and interesting point, that you could know things logically and you could even believe them, but somehow you still need something more to buy in, and that buy-in is so important. Because if you don't do that with your whole everything, then you're going to be missing the simcha. Aval Mikol Moken, but the Rebbe says, but still in all, okay, I understand. Ha'amnam nachutz hadavar kol kach ad sheyesh l'sakin l'shem kach es chayim shel meraglim. Okay, buy-in is important. Joy is important. You want them to come into the land and to embrace it in full-throated manner. But really, is this so necessary as to endanger the lives of the Meraglim? They could have been killed for coming into Eretz Canaan and engaging in this type of reconnaissance mission. So let's just review before we go to Gimel, the 3 questions that we have so far. Number 1, if the logical way to go about conquering a land is through gathering intelligence, why did Hashem not command this? Why was this left depending on Moshe Rabbeinu's judgment call or his opinion, and so on and so forth? The second question was, how do these people, who are presumably some of the greatest people that lived during that time, Moshe chose them because they were most fitting for this job. How did they go so wrong? How did they change not only from being ksherim, proper people to do this, to people who created, like the Rebbe says, a bechia l'dayris, a tragedy, a travesty that we would speak about until the end of time? And the third question is, we understand that there were 2 aspects to their mission. They had to scout out information regarding conquering this land, and then they were to scout out information about the land itself, focusing specifically on the agricultural viability of the land, or the success rate of agricultural pursuit in the land. So much so that they had to bring home fruit, like Exhibit A, which the Rebbe explains would necessitate danger. So if you make a cost-benefit analysis, the Rebbe says, I understand the benefits of bringing home the fruit, the show and tell. But really, is it so important as to endanger the lives of those who are sent on this mission? Those are the 3 questions. Gimel. The echad habiurim bazeh. The Rebbe says in one of the explanations, Amnam yisoid kiyum hateru hakdama nase lenishma. Despite the fact that one of the most basic ideas that we learn concerning the observance of Torah and mitzvahs is that first has to be nasa. We accept, we subserviate ourselves to the will of Hashem. And then it has to be nishma. We hear, meaning we understand, we learn. Aval afal pikein. But although this is the order, that has to be hakdamas nasa lenishma, still in all, nasa bilvad einoi maspik. But doing alone, even with the highest level of Kabbalas ol, accepting upon yourself the yoke of heaven and understanding that we can't understand, and all of this good stuff, it's not enough. It's not enough to just fulfill what the Eibishter wants in robotic fashion. There must be, after the nasa, after we do, there must be that second step of nishma, of understanding, of analyzing, of ruminating. In other words, the nishma is not to get us to the nasa. The nasa has to be, for sure, but that's still not enough. There has to be the nishma. Miloshen havana. Nishma, it's not just to hear, it's not just to listen, it's to understand. And the Rebbe brings down a pasuk from Shmuel Aleph, K'moy daber ki shemea avtecha. Speak says the Nabi to Hashem, because your servant is listening, your servant understands, your servant is engaged. The Kenu Gam le'inyan haknisa le'aretz Yisrael. And the same thing applied regarding going in to Eretz Yisrael. Hein emesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu hediya levnei Yisrael shazui Eretz Teiva Rechava. It's all true that Hashem let Bnei Yisrael know that this was going to be a good land, an expansive land. Aval ritzoynei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it was Hashem's will. Shebnei Yisrael yiru v'yuvachu, that Bnei Yisrael should see and that Bnei Yisrael should be convinced, betuv shebe'eretz Yisrael gam besichlam hein. They should be convinced of the goodness of the land with their own cognition, with their own intelligence. Don't take it on faith. Don't take it on blind faith, and don't even take it on informed faith. But rather, you should understand through your own seichel, and it should be proven to you how good the land is. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu commanded that they should bring of the fruit of the land. So that their entrance into Eretz Yisrael should be not only because Hashem commanded, so therefore they have to do what Hashem commanded, nasa, but rather it should come from their desire. Sheyavinu besichlam ki ra'oi lirtzais. They should understand with their own seichel how desirable it is lehikones le'eretz Yisrael liyosa eretz teva or chava la'amitasa. That they should be excited, that they should be anxious, that they should understand how amazing this land is, how desirable, what a great gift. And the same is true regarding the other aspect of their mission. The first, levarer, to clarify, mahi haderech harauya lichbashas Eretz Yisrael. What is the proper way to conquer the land? Shahakavana bazeh haisa shebnei Yisrael yiru v'yivachachu besichlam ki yochol noicha la. Again, the kavana, the intention was that Bnei Yisrael should see, and it should be proven. They should process it, I guess, like we would say today, and they should come to the conclusion that, yes, this is possible. And yes, Chani, exactly the difference between Eved and Shaliach. And this is also the reason why Shakadosh Baruch Hu loy siva al shiluach hameraglim. This is why the Eibishter did not command regarding sending the meraglim. Ela shlach lecha ledaitcha. But rather, Hashem said to Moshe, this has to be on your impetus. It has to be on your own steam. Ledaitcha. Me'achar shehamechuban b'shiluach hameraglim hu lifel b'bnei Yisrael nishma b'negel knisa la'aretz. Because the whole intention of sending meraglim was in order to effectuate this level of nishma, that Bnei Yisrael understand it, that they want it, that they are excited, that they are embracing this. Gam hashiluach gufa haya ba'ofen shel. So the very mission had to begin, it had to percolate from the ground up. It had to be l'daitcha. Mishum shekein nidrash mitzat hadas v'loy rak ba'ofen shel naseh b'mnei she'ani mitzav lecha. Because that's the only way that it can happen on the level of das, on the level of cognition, on the level of embracing it as a human being must, first by understanding it. Because otherwise, it's going to be only on the level of nasa. It's going to be because Hashem commanded you. So it's going to be, okay, you're robotically doing what Hashem wants. Dalit. Va'al pizeh yuban gam ketzad hameraglim she'oisa shak she'im hayu yuchlu lagia l'nefila kazu. And now, based on what the Rebbe said in Seif Gimel about what the intention was, we can better understand how it is that people who, when they left on the mission, sherim hayu, they were kosher, they were complete, they were viable, they were good. How did it happen that they fell so far? Ad she'amru loy nuchal la'alais. So much so that they said, we cannot do this. It's not possible to go up to this land. Because the whole mission was about nishma. It was about analyzing, gathering data, and experimenting how to go into the land. Al pi seichel, through their cognition, yachla liyos lahem ta'os b'shikol hadas. Therefore, it was possible for them to enter into a mistaken cost-benefit analysis. Sharei kol divreim shel meraglim edis eretz Yisrael b'yishim ba azha'am v'gam yilidei anak omer. Because everything that the Meraglim said about Eretz Yisrael and those that populate the land, that it is a very formidably strong nation, and that amongst them are giants, hayu divrei emes. It was all true. Va'af maskan nasam ki lo nuchal la'alois hainu she'al pi teva efshar lichbash et Eretz Yisrael yeshla makom b'seichel. And their conclusion as well was cogent. Al pi teva, there did not seem to be a way to conquer this land. V'nimtza, and so it appears, shahameraglim kimu l'daitam es hashlichus shalishma nishlachu. It would seem that the Meraglim fulfilled their shlichus. The Eibishter said to Moshe, l'daitcha, send people who will gather the facts and come back and give you a report based on their intelligence. So they came back and they did exactly this. And everything they said was sound, and everything they said had a place in Seichel. So it seemed that they completed their shlichus. V'nekudas ta'usam haisa be'etzem hadavar. But the central point of their mistake essentially was shahaisifu maskana. They did not just come back from a fact-gathering mission and put a file on Moshe's desk, but they added their opinion. In conclusion, loy nuchal la'alais. We cannot go up. It's not possible. Moshe Rabbeinu lo sha'al milechatchila l'daitam im efshar lichbaishes Eretz Yisrael im lav. Moshe Rabbeinu did not send them for the purpose of coming back to him and telling him, is it possible or not to conquer this land? Hu shalachosam rak al benos levarar keitzad noyach yoseh lechavsha. He sent them only to figure out what is the best way for them, for Bnei Yisrael, to conquer the land. But he didn't ask them for their opinion about the plausibility, about the viability of the project. Ba'adraba, on the contrary, from the very fact that he sent them on this mission, lachkor v'livchoin es haderech lichbaishes Eretz Yisrael, to research and to analyze the proper way to conquer the land, this just proves that this was a viable project, that this was eminently doable. He didn't ask them if it's doable or not.
Rivky,
yeah.
Question.
Esther, regards from your precious Eniklach and your son and your daughter-in-law.
Thank you.
Amazing,
You in
amazing.
Arizona?
I am. Amazing to watch them in action.
Oh, you are in Arizona?
I am indeed.
Enjoy every minute of it.
Thank you.
So you were at the graduation yesterday?
I was. That was only one of 3 things that your son had to lead.
Well, thank you.
In one day.
In one day. I want to just for clarification. Moshe says to them, the purpose, or the Rebbe is saying, the purpose was this for the nishma. Okay, so and talking about das is perception. It's where we fall into the picture. It's where our
knowledge,
right? So it's our perception or our analysis that is taken into on a personal. It's already subjective. So that's exactly what they did. What exactly did Moshe? What was wrong? What was wrong with them? Exactly what is that I was saying here when they were asked? Okay.
Now that can I add? Right, I'd like to add to that question. Sorry, I thought you finished.
Okay. So I just want to clarify, what exactly did they do wrong? Even if they said the wrong thing, why cannot it be counted as, okay, we gave you a minute to analyze this from the nishma, your own perception. And okay, so they made a mistake, but why is it so drastic? Do you understand when this was part of their mission? So exactly what is that I've been talking about here?
And I'd like to add to the question that's leering at us, okay, that the whole thing was to be able to do it besimcha, with your das, to realize, and it should bring an extra simcha. So by going to Eretz Yisrael and them sing Al Pi Sechel, that didn't bring more simcha. Okay, they should have had more Kabbalah Sol to Moshe Rabbeinu, to what Hashem wanted. But if the whole purpose was for them to see it and they should feel it b'sechel that it was great, they weren't going to do that.
But if we answer, Rachi, to answer your question, if we said, if their premise was going in believing that, of course, Hashem can take us in, but Hashem wanted them to feel it with their own eyes and see it, then they wouldn't have had any anxiety. The anxiety was because they felt like, oh my gosh, how are we going to be able to take over these people? Really, if they went in with the premise of Hashem can take care of us, and of course Hashem can take us in, Hashem wanted them to see with their own eyes, wow, this is so rich and luscious, the land, oh, that's amazing, then they would have had more joy. But all the anxiety that came really was because of their lack of faith that Hashem could do it. But I think Esther's question, I hear where that has space, but I think, Rachi, that maybe can eliminate the question.
You're right. Thank you.
I think, I could be wrong, but I have to say that the reason I gravitate towards the Sikha this week is because, we're coming to Gimel Tammuz, and I feel like the whole thing is just jumping off the page as a directive to us. And maybe, Esther, Rachi, if we kind of bring it to our life, right? So the Rebbe is saying, the Rebbe is not saying this, but what I'm hearing is, I don't want you to be avodim. I don't want you to be my little minions, my little servants, my little robots, my little acquiescent little army. I actually want you to be my shluchim. And here I'm talking in the widest sense of every chassid and every person that doesn't know that they're a chassid or chassidah yet. I want you to fulfill my mission. And I want you to find creative and ingenious ways to do it. And each one of you is going to do it in a different way. But I'm not asking you if this is what has to be done now to bring Mashiach, for instance. I'm not asking you if now is the right time to put up these crazy big ginormous menorahs all over the landscape. I'm telling you now, all you have to do is find the best way to do it. And that is in Esther of Das, because you're right, Das is about the self being connected. So it has to be l'daitcha, because when we go about the fulfillment of the Rebbe's directives, but it's in like sterile fashion because we don't bring ourselves to the table. I guess this is where I use the term show up. So if we're not completely engaged with our das, then that's not what the Rebbe wants from us. So Moshe Rabbeinu, yeah, he wasn't asking their opinion if they should go to Eretz Yisrael, but in the kibush haaretz, which really, if you think about it, that's what the Rebbe wants from us now. The Rebbe says, I'm giving it over to you. I did everything I could, and now I need you to do the kibush haaretz. And it has to be l'daitcha. I'm not going to dictate to you.
But what's interesting is that with the Meraglim, they are asked to make a judgment call. Hatova imrad. It's not like Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, Hashem is saying, just go. And like, I want you to take on this mission with joy and take it all in. They are supposed to make a judgment call. Like, how do you assess this land? And they did come back with an assessment, to Esther's point. And then that assessment seemed to be what got them down this rabbit hole of problems. But from what you're saying, it seems like I hear what you're saying and I get that, but
again, the Rebbe is saying, yes, make an assessment. Yes, write a report. Yes, give me all the data. Yes, give me your analysis, but not if the project should be undertaken, but how the project should be undertaken.
So why didn't he just say it, Moshe Rabbeinu? You know? I'm not asking you how, if, I'm asking you how. I mean, I'm feeling like I don't want you to be a soldier, but be a soldier. I mean, if you're not a soldier, you don't come to freaking Uruguay. I'm sorry.
Okay, so that's exactly the razor edge that we live on. Rivky, if you wanted easy, you should have made sure that you weren't born into Chabad family. Well, we'll have to say, or gravitate towards a Chabad family. It's not for the faint-hearted. You're right. It's living on the edge. Yes, with Seichel, but at the same time with enormous Kabbalah soul to the overarching shlichus. It's not a simple place. It's not a simple place.
I think, Rivky, maybe that was the key. Maybe that's the key, what you just said. Maybe that's the key, that you have to go with your own, not you have to, I want you to go with your own perception. I want you to go with your own das. The purpose here is to develop a personal attachment. But the underlying thing must be at all times Kabbalah Soil. And that they may have been missing.
The Rebbe fetches this thing in so many sichas.
The underlying thing, if this is the Kabbalah Soil, this is what Eibishter wants.
Yeah.
It's what the Rebbe is sending me for. No matter what, no matter when, it doesn't make any sense. And I don't see how I'm going to overcome. And I'm not going to win this battle. It's not going to happen. But the Rebbe promised me, or the Eibishter said, I will overcome, just do a little bit and it'll open up. That maybe that's the lesson of the Meraglim. That's what the Rebbe was trying to, the underlying factor must have the element Kabbalah Soil to succeed, because it never looks like you can overcome.
There are a lot of sichas.
In practical terms, we weren't taught how that should happen. And the men for sure were not taught how to make that happen, that your das is up to, like, what does it mean to use your own das? Let's say you're not a type of person that could run a community, but you're fantastic in, I don't know, in speaking. You know, you're not a people's person to make a community. I'm giving an example, right? but you were sent, you're here, you're in a place that you're supposed to build a community. Okay, so das would be, okay, have the understanding and the skill to hire somebody that would be do XYZ while you do your own das type, your own, you put in your own talents. Do you understand? I'm getting into the nitty gritty. You understand? The person doesn't express necessarily, if you were sent 30 years ago, your own talents. That's the new shluchim and the new shluchim. You understand? The original shluchim, I'm not saying that I'm original, but I'm just saying the older shluchim from the mems, right? We didn't use art necessarily. I didn't use my own talents. I did what had to be done because there was no one else here. I don't know if I'm.
But maybe what Rivky's saying about walking on the.
You are Mr. Nefesh and surviving another day. Oh, Mashiach didn't come today. I think there's a before and after.
But Rafi, that's probably exactly what I was talking about when it comes to shlichus. That's exactly what the Meraglim needed. They needed to go there just like that.
And maybe right now, like what you're saying about walking the razor edge, I think maybe it's to our detriment that we get so caught up in what is my skill set and am I using it? Because then a lot of times it becomes about me, and really we need to lose ourselves in this picture in order for it to happen. And we're so busy trying to express us. I can only speak for myself, but sometimes it's like, hold on, am I using all my talents, abilities, etc.? Whereas really, if I can let go of that, maybe I can allow the bigger overarching picture to come in, which is what it seems like the what the Rebbe is saying over here to me.
I think
Okay, first of all, thank you. But and maybe that's why there's a certain hatzlacha, let's say my personal situation, because it was just pure Mesiras Nefesh for so many years. And that's why that maybe attracted a lot of people. But if you live on Mesiras Nefesh, I feel that that's not Shlach Lecha Nashim. That's not L'da'ascha. That's not, okay, whatever. Thank you very much. But I get what you're saying. Chani, it did help me. Thank you.
Listen, the reason we're grappling with this, the reason that we're having this conversation is because this is such a difficult thing. It's like the original Impossible Meat, whatever, Possible Burger, whatever they're making today, like it is and it's not. And, like Sippa just wrote in the chat, like it is a higher level to go with Das than to go just as a soldier, only with Mesiras Nefesh. But what the Rebbe always wanted from us was Atzmos. And Atzmos is a place where two diametrically opposing things merge. And it's not a simple balance. And it constantly has to be, checks and balances. And you're right that there were things that were done purely on Mesiras Nefesh, seemingly without seichel, without understanding. And you could even say that maybe it was necessary for certain things to be, quote unquote, broken through with that approach. And then there's the other layer of daitra, of specifically your skill set. I mean, we could bring about this for many, many, many hours. But it seems clear that what we're saying is that the very greatness of the shlichus is what makes it so dangerous and so vulnerable to corruption. Really, 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 we're back to the whole story of Eitz Hadas. Why did Chava eat from the Eitz Hadas? The Eibusher told her not to. But she knew that she could unlock a higher level. The higher level comes with a lot of pain and a lot of danger and a lot of messiness. I'm not on my own device, so I can only catch what's in the chat if I see it, like when it's coming across the screen, because I'm afraid to do anything and then I'm going to lose the whole thing. I'm just
wrote that maybe it was like stage one to go on pure Mesiras Nefesh, and that was what was needed, so that today people on a lower level I'm talking about like, this generation could go with das. I didn't mean to throw out
Yeah.
lower level.
I'm very jealous. First of all, I'm jealous of them. I know that, like slonim and ISIS, of all that I've done, very nice. But I'm just saying that, it's much more fun to do it with das. I mean, it's so much more exciting if I would have gone on shluchas today with doing what I like and, I don't know.
I think don't you think it's more exciting to take like dynamite and blow up a mountain than to like think about your skill set and take like a personality test and figure what you're good at?
No, because I like my personality.
Rachi, everything that you did was with Mesiras Nefesh and very much through the funnel of your personality. Red Midish Ein. You're never going to convince me otherwise.
Okay, but it's okay. Now another thing. Okay, I wanted to say, but enough.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
No. I can talk forever. Bye.
I was going to tell you Zag L'chaim on a little bit of goat milk. If hey.
Can I just say something because it might be good for everybody? Oh, it's being recorded. My husband discovered that Jersey cows, if you're lactose intolerant, you could drink that milk and cottage cheese and cream cheese. My husband just had milk and cheese and everything for the first time in 50 years. Jersey cows. Okay, just put it out there for the first time. Thank you.
Are you importing this to the United States of America?
Because their fat
It's
content
not my
is higher.
personality. Business is not my personality. I didn't get it in the genes. It didn't come down to me.
The fat content is higher, so there's less milk protein.
Okay, thank you for that public service announcement. Hey, Torah milashon hara. So everything that we learn is an instruction. Omizem muvan. Shebeteri yeshna gam hadracha v'hira keita lihinatzel mitaos hamaraglim. And so therefore it's clear that the Torah has instruction for us as to how to be saved from this very misstep of the Meraglim. Umahia Eitzah. What's the Eitzah? So what are we being taught? Shem haparsha al pi minak Yisrael hu Shelach miloshen shlichus. The name of the parsha is, after all, Shelach, etymologically rooted in the notion of being sent, being an emissary. Al Yehudi lada shagam kasher hu misaseh ba'avoda shel nishma. Every Jew has to know that even when involved and invested in the avoda of nishma, of understanding and ruminating and analyzing, lahavin b'sichla, l'daitcha, to understand it with his own seichel. Alav liskor b'chol eish shehu eisazis b'tor shaliach shel Moshe. At the very same time, we have to remember every moment that this is all being done as an emissary of Moshe. Loi mishum shechoshka nafshoy lahavinas hadavar. Listen to what the Rebbe is saying here. Forget about that you're doing it because Moshe Rabbeinu sent you. No, but even the fact that you are struggling to understand it, that you are engaged in the process of processing, that too is not because that's what you want to do, but because this is the divine will, because this is a celestial will. It's a very interesting and deep word here. It's not just that you have to fulfill the mission knowing that you're an emissary, but even the investment of your mind and your heart is because that's what the Mishaleach wants you to do. And then, and only then, va'azai muftach loy shelo yikoshel loy rak benase elagam benishma. And only when we remember every moment that the very latitude that we've been given to use the tools of our cognition and to use the modalities of our own talents and our own personalities, this is also only alpi shlichus. So it's not like, okay, so now it's so stratified and you could choose if you want to deal with young children, or you want to deal with teens, or you want to deal with college kids, or you want to deal with young professionals, or you want to deal with the elderly. But it's a fallacy to think that that's really the case. Because just like in the early days, like the Rebbe said to Rabbi Sudak, when he said, what should I do? The Rebbe said, you're going to go and you're going to find plenty of things to do. But again, whether it's this amorphous thing called shlichus, you'll go and you'll to a new country and you'll find what to do, or you're being hired for something very, very specific, but really the hatzlacha hinges on knowing that all of it, even the investment of the self, is only al pi hadibor, it's only because that's what the Mishalech wants. And only then, ba'azai, and only then, muftach lo yikashel, that we won't stumble. Not only in the nasa part, but also in the nishma part. Hadavar maftiach, doing it in this way is an insurance policy. Shahasechel yasechel amiti, sheyavoy l'dei maskana amitis. And here the Rebbe is going to explain something about sechel. Rebbe says, and only by engaging even in the personal buy-in, as it were, can we be assured that the conclusions that we come to through our seichel will be the proper and the true conclusions. And the Rebbe says like this: In yanei shel seichel hu livchoin ulevarer es hamuskel kafi shehu lamitasei. The purported goal of cognition, of intellectual inquiry, is to clarify and to test the thesis, so to speak, to test the truth and the authenticity of a certain idea. And in order for that to happen, al ha'adam levatel es kol hanetiyos ha'ishiyos v'chulei. In order to really engage in intellectual inquiry, you have to put aside all of your personal biases. Ulekarev ulechavin atzmai el hadavar shemivakesh lechavin. And only then can you bring yourself closer and can you really point yourself in the direction of what it is you want to actually understand. So it's the polar opposite of what's happening in academia today, where you start with the conclusion and then you look for data to bolster that thesis, right? Unfortunately. But the Rebbe says, but truly engaging in intellectual inquiry, in daitcha, means to purge the field, to cleanse the field of any and all personal biases. Kasher sichloi shel adam mamik be'inyan mesuyam rak l'shem tainuk ishi. Look what the Rebbe is saying here. When a person engages their seichel and they become deeply invested in something only for their personal pleasure and gratification, azai ein mushleles his arvos shel netios issues, then you cannot obviate the admixture, the corruptive influence of personal biases. So much so that a person will try to conform the data to their own thought process. That's just the way people are. So if you're engaging in this for your own benefit or your own pleasure or your own preconceived notions, you will find a way to skew the data to conform with what you already believe or want. And the Rebbe says, "V'zehu echad habi'urim le'inyan hashoichat." The Rebbe says, and this is a different way of understanding bribery. And what does the Torah say about bribery? Bribery is such a dangerous thing. It's such a powerful thing. It's such a noxious thing because it could even blind the eyes of chachamim, of very, very great people. V'yasali divrei tzadikim. And it could completely skew the words of even the pious. And the Rebbe says, the l'chayra, seemingly, me'acha sheteres emes me'ida shemedubar kam b'chachamim v'tzadikim. The Maimer Chazal is saying that this is what bribery can do, not to pedestrian folk on the street, to chachamim and tzadikim. The Torah is saying about these people, these are great people. Hareheim bevadei chachamim v'tzadikim amitiyim. So it's not just like a mother says, my barela is such a tzaddik. These are real tzaddikim. These are real chachamim. And if this is so, how is it possible that they will take bribery? Ella, but rather the Rebbe says, I'm introducing you to a deeper, more subtle understanding of this. Lefisha inin hasheichad, hu loy rak kabbalas mamaynu kayetzu bazeh hamovila la'amira sheker goloi. Sheikhat should not be understood in this very simplistic way of you take money under the table, and this leads and expresses itself in you saying an untruth. Ella, but rather, kol zman shemachsheves ha'adam eina oides hametzias k'moy shehi. Any time, the Rebbe says, that a person is not focused with their thought process on the actual mitzias, on the facts, but rather the person is focused on themselves. They're focused on their existence. How am I going to feel about this? What is this going to do for me? How is this going to curate my image? When a person is thinking about themselves, it's not possible for them to have true understanding of the matter at hand. It's a meichdike word the Rebbe is teaching us here. Daitcha has to be understood properly. It has to be parsed. Daitcha about the thing is different than daitcha about yourself. And it's a very hard thing to be able to distinguish between the two. And this might be why the Rebbe said that it's a bakasha nafshis, that we should have people that we talk to that have a little bit more of a remove, because it becomes so difficult for us to understand what's happening in our minds and in our hearts. It's not so simple to parse. Am I thinking about the Inyan or am I thinking about myself? When most of the time the Inyan is, it's like we feel like there's no daylight between the two.
Could you explain it again?
If not what I'm trying to do. Sorry?
Could you explain that again? Because what do you mean? Okay, you're thinking according to your education and your beliefs. You're not thinking about the thing itself.
But that's
So how do you separate yourself from your education?
Let's read it again. The Rebbe is saying, what is shaychat? What is bribery? Especially the Torah is telling us, we're talking about chachamim, we're talking about tzaddikim. So it can't just be, you're getting $5 million for you and $5 million for your son, and you're just going to turn the other cheek or the other eye. No, something else is happening here. So the Rebbe says like this: Lefisha inin hashaychadhu loira kabbalas mammon kiyetzvazeh hamayvila la mira sheker goloi. The idea of sheikhad is not just you take something quid pro quo and then this leads you to saying an untruth. Ella, but rather, kol zman shemachsheves ha'adam eina oides hametzius kimois shehi. The Rebbe underlines those words. For as long as a person's thought process is not strictly focused and trained on the inyan kimoy shehi objectively, I think that's what it means. But rather it's about himself and his existence, his personal existence. Then it's impossible for this person to have a true understanding of what it is they're trying to study.
Rivky?
Let's take the situation in Israel. Let's not get into a can of worms. I'm just saying you open a can of worms. I'm just saying you, so if not for my education and being Chabad chassid that I try to be, I just look at the Metzias and then I have a totally different opinion about what's going on in Israel. You know, without getting into details, I'm saying, so if I'm not thinking about I'm just looking at the thing, kamo shehi, without my Metzias, without who I am. It's two different scenarios. You said something before that I didn't understand. You said something like about studying yourself or realizing it's about yourself. Like you said something that I can't remember the words. It's the age thing, but basically,
I think that in your example of giving an opinion on a political situation or whatever is different than I think what the Rebbe is talking about here, which is when it's about your charge, it's about your mandate, your shlichus. And
okay.
And the Rebbe says here, and I know Hannah, you're up next to speak, but maybe if we could just say the next paragraph, learn the next paragraph. V'zu ha'sahasiba l'tos u'nefilas maraglim. And the Rebbe says therein lies the rub. That was the reason for the mistake and the fall of the maraglim. Hayachisarin ba'ofen habitul shalehem l'Moshe Rabbeinu. The chesaron was not in their report. The chesaron was in the attitude. They were lacking bittul. Shalei horgash gam b'shah she'asku be'inishal v'nishma latoras haaretz. It wasn't even that they were lacking bittul in the nasa. They were lacking bittul in the nishma, in the thought process, in the study, in the analysis. Chana Perlman.
Okay, that just answered one of my questions. But the other question I have is, you know, we recognize this in ourselves even. Sometimes we give a report or we just, it's a part of our nature, and we see it in other people that there's not that total accuracy because in some way you're protecting yourself or no. It happens all the time in human discourse and human thinking. Why didn't Moshe give them that warning? And Moshe knew that. So why didn't he give him a warning and say, don't give us your opinion here. Just give us the straight facts. Why was not that something that he went out of his way to make sure that this wouldn't happen?
I don't know, because Moshe never consulted with me then, and is not consulted with me today. But maybe hu hadavar, that's exactly it. That it's to teach us, among many other things, the inyan of what does it mean to be a shliach. And again, if that would have been said in full-throated fashion, then that might have knocked out the possibility for them to exercise the choice of having bittul in their nishma. In other words, the whole thing, what the Rebbe wants to underscore here is the inyan that goes through all of his Torah, koyach atzmai. It has to be you have to be a stakeholder here. Like the Rebbe said in his very first, when he took on the Nesius, that don't talk yourself into the fact that you're going to ride on my coattails. We're going to do this together. But if it's together, then I can't take away your agency. And I can't dictate to you about your bittul to me, because then it's not your bittul. Then see that answer, the Rebbe starts with this question of, is it l'daitcha or not l'daitcha? Because 2 psukim later, Rashi says it was with Hashem's agreement. So if it was with Hashem's agreement, why don't you just give us a command? We're really back. Your question was really an iteration of the first question that Rebbe asked. Miriam wrote before, very succinctly, that it's not about us, it's through us.
Right, so I wanted it to me, it's like every basic idea, like you referred back to Adam and Chava, and from the beginning is this nuance danced over and over with different scenarios of balancing how much of it is about you, which is usually not a lot, and how much is through you. But the you, I put capital because with your talents and abilities, they matter. You're an individual, you need to contribute, but it isn't about you, it's through you. And I think this story is like the whole Torah, including Torah Sashlichas. That's what we're here to do, to try to, whenever we get a little bit more, it's about me and my abilities and my talents, then we have to go, it's not about me. And then whenever it's not about me, no, but I'm here and it needs to be through me. And I don't know that we ever find a very clear, firm ground to stand on, because it's a dance. It's not a stagnant, like stay in one place and you got this. It's a struggle. It's a challenge.
And maybe the struggle is to remind us about this every single day. And that we cannot achieve equilibrium, because having the sensation that you achieved equilibrium is in and of itself the beginning of the problem, the pathology.
Right, the beginning of the end.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, reminds me of like this, there's an old vikuach, there's an old discussion, there's an argument. If every single day that a chassid is not by the Rebbe, they have to say Tfil Saderach. Or no, you don't say Tfil Saderach. In other words, you wake up feeling that you are where you're supposed to be, or you wake up feeling that you're where you're not supposed to be. The answer is both. You are and you're not.
It's like Shnas HaBinyan that the Rebbe said to build, but at the same time, personally, I got an answer from the Rebbe, obviously before Gimel Tammuz, that I told him that I should buy an apartment that was going to be ready in 2 years. Like if Chas V'Shalom, the Rebbe wrote, Chas V'Shalom Yisakim Mashiach Lo V'Koydem, I was going to find something before. Like how could I buy an apartment in Uruguay? This is like in 1990. And then after that came Shnas HaBinyan. So it's like, whoa. Do you understand?
I mean, I understand what you're saying. Do I understand the Indian? No. But I maybe that's the point.
I also don't, something we don't know. Let's all say it. Thank you. We don't understand this, because look at the next line of the Sikha, and then I'm gonna really have a lot to say. So I'm putting it on mute.
But when the Meraglim felt their existence, Azai Re'iyas Hanafilim B'nei Ha'anak Hetila Aleim Pachad. But once they were involved with themselves, when it was about themselves, that brought upon them that when they saw the giants, they did not see that or apprehend that or perceive that with the dispassionate understanding that the Abish just said that they're going to go into this land. They have nothing to worry about. They just have to figure out this road or that highway. No. When it was about them, it brought upon them a dreadful fear. They felt themselves to be like grasshoppers. And this erroneous perception that flowed from this place of self was the bribery, shehita esichlam. This caused them to go astray cognitively. Acha amru loy nuchal la'alais. We cannot go up. So the bribery here is not an external factor. It's the internal factor that makes them go awry. Aval.
This is so
However,
fascinating. This is so remarkable what the Rebbe just did.
It's beyond. It's
I'll tell
beyond.
you, Das by nature, according to what the Rebbe is saying is shaychad, Das by nature has shaychad in it. You cannot avoid it because Das is biased. Das is my perception where I connect to the idea.
Right.
So in of itself, Das must be biased. So that's a shaychad in a sense. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
But to
But the
even
Rebbe is saying,
make it neutral, what do you need? Bittul. You have to remember the Mishalech. You have to remember Moshe sending you. You have to remember what the Eibishter wants here. So in order to neutralize your das, where it does have shaychet, because it's impossible that it doesn't. Shaychet, das is personal. Otherwise, it's not das, it's my perception, how I attach to the concept. So then what happens now? It's only me. It's only my own perception, and it's going to be biased, and it's not going to have the information. So you must remember bittul.
which is precisely what the Rebbe says in the next paragraph. Aval hazoicher, this has to be underlined and put on the refrigerator. Aval hazoicher es heyosei shaliach, shlach, v'shluchai shel adam k'moisei. But when a person remembers that they're a shliach, and what is the inyan of a shliach? That you become like the person who sent you. L'shliach ein mitzius ishis, v'chol mitziusoi hi mitzius hamishaleach. A shliach doesn't have any personal existence. His entire existence is the mishaleach. And Esther, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Otherwise, das is ipso facto our undoing.
Exactly.
But when we attach ourselves to the Mishaleach, then it becomes the das, the ultimate das of Adam Yada Eschava. The ultimate knowledge and the ultimate fusing. And maybe that's why there's an Altavart by Hasidim that if Shlomo HaMelech would have known about a Rebbe and a Chassid, he would have written Shir HaShirim about a Rebbe and a Chassid, not about a man and a woman.
Can I add one more thing? I don't usually.
Absolutely.
This was an answer that we got from the Rebbe, and that's why we're still on Shlichus in Ottawa. We got a very clear answer from the Rebbe to stay in Ottawa, and that the Shliach does not make the Mishaleach, does not make a mistake. And even if a person thinks that he's not being Matzliach anymore, he should know that the Mishaleach did not make a mistake and sent him there, and he has the kefus of the Mishaleach to remain there and to continue to be successful.
Thank you so much for adding that. That's yeah, we all need to hear that. And there were a few people that got such an answer. Yeah. Ubazeh gufa hushluchai shel Moshe. And through attaching ourselves on this way, where we remember constantly who we are and what we are, we become the shluchim of Moshe. It means attached and connected to Moshe, who is Midas from him. Like Yeshua never Machshe kol ha'esi. Constantly, the shliach's thought process is lo eides atzmai. It's not about him. It's It's about the fact that he is a shliach of Moshe Rabbeinu. Azai hu eina naseh meshuchad, and only then is this person not vulnerable to bribery, this new understanding of bribery. Umemelo hu memale eshlichus latoris haaretz, and therefore is able to fulfill his mission of scouting the land. Hadayreshes sechel b'havona amitis. And the Rebbe keeps going back and forth. In other words, on one hand, it necessitates your intelligence, your cognition. And on the other hand, it's only about thinking about Moshe. But only in this way are we able to
Is Rivky up?
I'm so sorry. I don't know. I got kicked off of the call, but can you hear me? Okay. Ad kiyum hayiyud, until we have the fulfillment of the promise, Yarchiv Hashem Elokecha is that Hashem will expand our borders, the vias Mashiach Tzidkenu, with the coming of Mashiach, Bimhera V'Yameinu Mamash. I also wanted to add before we open up to discussion that there are many, many, many sichos where the Rebbe stresses that being a shliach is not about abandoning our seichel, our creativity, but this idea of bittul b'metzias to the mishaleach. So much so, here's the vart, that your das becomes the das of the mishaleach. And in Tafshim Memtes and Pasha Shelach, the Rebbe asks how Moshe Rabbeinu was not put off. How was he not scared away from this? When the Eibusher said to him, "L'daitcha," why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu run the other way? Why didn't he understand that this is a minefield and there could be a terrible takala from this? But the idea is, the Rebbe says, that that's precisely what the Eibusher was saying to Moshe. Moshe was not alarmed because he understood it as a mandate, as a charge that you have to take it from here. You have to own it. But your daitcha has to ultimately be the das of the Mishaleach. So again, it's like what we've been saying the whole time. It's like this is exquisite dance back and forth, this balance, which seems impossible in many, many ways, but is what is being asked of us. And in halacha, it's an interesting thing about the idea of a shliach. It says in halacha, the shliach shel adam k'maaseh. For instance, a man can give a get to his wife through a shliach. But what's so fascinating about this, and maybe this will help us here also to understand this, is that on one hand, the shliach is nothing. Literally, they're nothing. They're a proxy. They become the arms and the legs of this husband that sent them to give a get to their wife. On the other hand, you can't be a shliach if you don't have cognition. A child can't be a shliach. Somebody who has deficits in understanding can't be a shliach. In other words, you have to bring all of you to it and be nothing at the same time.
Would you mind to just explain the bribery concept? I just am having a little trouble understanding what it was.
The bribery is not something that somebody is offering you from outside of you. Like, here's a carrot.
Can I say?
I'm sorry, Rebbetzin Jaffe, can you say again? Because I couldn't hear you. Is it just me, or can anybody hear? Okay, so maybe we'll circle back. So Tzippa, and anybody else that can help, please chime in. The way I'm understanding it is that the bribery comes in the form of us putting ourselves at the center of the equation rather than the inyan that actually has to be studied. So we're not thinking about the inyan bereft of how it's going to affect us. And that's what can skew our ultimate decisions or conclusions or actions based on that.
So I'm not gonna say what I want to say because it's really me thinking of what it's me. And therefore I'm gonna not say and ask and do everything else right now. So, okay, let me think about the sikha, because it's me is not really me, because my seichel, but yeah, it's seichel with bittul, bekitzer, but at the same time, it's like, talking about Chava, Hashem wanted it to happen, right? She did a good thing. She did a great thing. I mean, poor us, we're blamed for Chava,
I think
the
no.
women.
Ebesha didn't he didn't let it happen. He didn't want it to happen, but he let it happen, and that's a very big difference. He let it happen.
How do you know Hashem didn't want it to happen? Of course. Why wouldn't Hashem want it to happen? I mean, that's when the game started.
The Ebesha let a lot of things happen that we think shouldn't have happened, but they did happen. Did he want it? I'm sure he didn't want it. He would have preferred it without.
No, but then the whole idea of Bchir Choshes came into the world, and Hashem didn't want to create, a bunch of right? He didn't want a tachtainim where everybody was soldiers. It's, I think Hashem wanted it to happen, but who am I? I don't know if I have the bittul in there. I got to think about it. I don't know if I got to think about it. Should I think? Should I not think? I don't know. It's a very interesting week I'm going to have here, Rivky. Thank you very much.
Listen, there's the whole Indian of sinning. There's Hasidus on this, right? That the whole idea of sin, the whole idea of the rupture of Eitz Hadas, it's neged haratzin and it's lafi hakavana at the same time.
It happens by default.
It doesn't. Nothing can happen by default. It happens because ultimately the Eibishter wants it to happen, but it is painful and messy and not lafi haratzin that it should happen. At the same time, that is lafi hakavana. So it's a very complex place, but I think it's different than this idea of shlichus. It's connected because of the messiness and the possibility of the fallout from the whole idea of daitcha, of being vested with the possibility of using your mind.
I think a lot of people go into shlichus thinking they'll do A, B, and C, and it doesn't happen. So they end up doing something totally different. But when I can only say from experience, I have many years to look back and say the Rebbe wanted us to do this, not what we wanted to do. He knew what we were capable of. And I didn't know. I had no idea. But we did what he wanted, hopefully. And I see Paris. We do see Paris from it. It's, the other way would have been our way, but maybe we would have seen not very much. Anyway, that's years of experience, which
Yeah, but there's a difference
maybe I've
between
learned
Paris
something.
that you, there's difference of Paris that you invested your sechel and talents in than Paris that just happened because it's just miraculous, the amount of Balei Tshuva. It's just like, so therefore, okay. By the way, that's Pimenta's song. Mitzvah goret mitzvah, v'avirat goreret avira. As echad shar she'avirat tigror mitzvah. Okay, I could have sung it, but I think men hear this year, so I was careful. I used my brains.
I think either way, as soon as we start talking about Paris, we probably are mixing in our own judgment, which probably would fall into the category of maybe Shechad. I don't know.
I talk from experience.
I
Some of you are quite young, and I am not young anymore. So
Oh,
I can
yes,
only-
you are.
in my head, I'm still 21. I'm still really a 3-year-old, but
That's the only place that counts.
no, it's the Rebbe. I would never, I would never have dreamt when, you know, that we were capable of doing what we did or what I did. No, nothing. I had no plans really. It was new to Lubavitch, new to everything, and the Rebbe knew better. Definitely knew better.
Rivky, can I just say
Esther, stop already with the asking.
it's not for that. Interestingly, the Kli Yakar says that Moshe should have sent women. And
Thank you for saying that. I just heard it. I heard that it was a Barbanel.
I heard that.
Thank you. I just heard it 3 weeks ago. Thank you.
Yes, and had he sent women, we never would have had this problem. The men would have probably had to come get us. When you look at the nice Shelach, but it's a serious mafart. I mean, it's not, and that's a very cute. I use this example. I want to add something that I don't know if whatever. When it comes to it was after the Meraglim that Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Eibishter to rest the Shechina on 10. The concept of a minyan happens from Meraglim because you had 12 tzaddikim and 10 made a terrible mistake. And it was here that Moshe Rabbeinu said that we will not be able to survive if you have 10 tzaddikim and they can come back with a bad report like this. How can the future survive? I mean, here they heard the word of Hashem, their own. They were at Mount Sinai. They saw the Nisim. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, because why? Because it happened twice already. It's the second time that you have 10 tzaddikim come up with a bad plan. First time by the brothers, they sold Yosef. Third time would be a chazaka. So he said to the Eibishter, how are we going to survive this? Will you rest your Shechina upon it? And that's where the concept of a minyan comes from for 10 men. I mean, I'm sure there's other places, but this is one of where he asked. This is by the Meraglim. He asked, would you rest your Shechina on them? But the women weren't involved. And women being involved in that kind of a setup would not clean anything up for the men. The men needed this because you have 10 tzaddikim. But there's nowhere in history where you have 10 women who want to do something righteous and they sin. But in the concept of being counted, we find the whole concept of minyan by Avraham, by Steinman Amar. He comes to the saving the world, he says 10, because he knows 8 can't. And in the 8 of Noach, where he brings an example, you have 4 men, 4 women. So when it comes to saving the world for good, women count equally. He didn't say 10 men then. It was 10 people based on Noach. Okay? But in the concept of a minyan, we look at it as a negative for women, that we are not counted. At least that's what the world tells us. But it's absolutely the opposite. The men needed to keep them directed even when they are tzaddikim, so there shouldn't be shaykhad mixed into it. That's exact. And for us, and then like Yaakov says, you should have sent women. We'd have had no problem in the first place. Anyway, l'chaim.
Chaim, thank you so much.
So shouldn't we be afraid if 10 men, righteous men get together, then maybe they're going to do something wrong and it's going to be a chazaka. Maybe we should be very wary of it.
No, Moshe took care of it. Moshe took care of it.
He did?
That's exactly the point. He asked the Abisher to rest his shechina on 10 men, no matter what. If they're davening, if they're doing something positive, Moshe Rabbeinu took care of it. That's the point.
Is there
So we would be freed up so we don't have to babysit the men. So we could do what we need to do.
Rivky and
Is
there a situation?
His first explanation that he explains is why did Moshe choose men? So he connects it that it was the parsha right after Miriam and Lashon Hara, and that the women are maybe more have more of a I don't know, affinity to speaking Lashon Hara. So send men; they're not going to speak Lashon Hara. And then he gives the second explanation on the word lecha, that Hashem says to Moshe, you could choose men, but if it was up to me, this is the Klei Yakar saying, I would choose women because the women love Eretz Yisrael more than the men, and they for sure wouldn't speak Lashon Hara about the land. So you can go a lot of directions with the Klei Yakar, but it's definitely an interesting perspective that had the women been on the job, it would have looked differently. Although I don't know what Chava would say.
Question: is there an example of ledatcha, but not totally ledatcha, datcha with bittul? Is there an example from the Torah that it did work? That this whole concept worked? Didn't work in Eitzadas. Moshe was afraid for the disaster that Taka happened. So let's see a good story, a positive story that we can learn from.
What do you mean it didn't work with Eitz Hadas? Eitz Hadas opened up the possibility of going either way. So any time that we make a choice to do something that the Eibusher wants us to do, that's the positive legacy of Eitz Hadas.
Okay, I'm talking about as a historical thing that, let's say, like a repeat of what happened with Moshe. Moshe realized that this could be opening up creating a terrible situation that it ended up being. Where do we see in history that this happened, but it ended up in a good way?
Mashiach coming.
That people,
I think this is where the Rebbe juxtaposes, but I didn't learn anything recently. I'm just in the recesses of my memory. I think the Rebbe has sichas where he compares that when Yeshua, when they actually years later went into Eretz Yisrael, Yeshua sent Meraglim, but there was a positive outcome because they went with a different sense of bittul. I'm not mistaken, but I would have to look it up.
Also, this is a repeated pattern, as we're saying, but Mashiach's coming. This is like the final tikkun of this situation, and we're kind of all in this together, trying to make this balance between das and what we're supposed to accomplish. And so we're going to accomplish it. Mashiach's going to come, and we've finally succeeded in something that needed the tikkun all along.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's so correct. Okay, wishing everybody a most wonderful week filled with hatzlacha and bracha and every refuah and Yeshua, and we should be able to use our das in the right way. It's Hashem.
Amen.
Thank you.
Tov.
Yeah.
Hey, Shalom. Hello.